So when we were trying to put the outline together for this session, the idea was defending dignity and how we frame dignity as a human, as a person being in this country, being in this world, and the idea that civil rights could be equally tied to human rights. And I'm going to turn it over to the three ladies we have here, just amazing speakers in their own right, amazing leaders in their own right. First, we have Ms. Vanessa Cárdenas from America's Voice. She's the executive director. Vanessa is amazing in many ways. She not only heads up this amazing organization that does a lot of work throughout the country. She's originally from Bolivia, no? Boliviana, there we go. We have Tara Murray, Senior Vice President for the National Urban League. National Urban League, it's everywhere. It's just like LULAC, we're in all places doing phenomenal work in civil rights space. It's been around forever. And then Virginia Kase Solomón, Common Cause, our fellow partner in crime here. Again, in so many different ways. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kase Solomón, who will facilitate and moderate this panel here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Virginia Kase Solomón. I am the president and CEO of Common Cause, also Boricua, so I'm very happy to, if I have any Puerto Ricans here. But we wanted to have an intimate conversation today. This is definitely going to be a conversation among friends. And I don't know, Juan, or Roman, if we'll have opportunities for questions afterwards, but you can let us know. We see what's happening in this moment. I know many of us, our spirits are heavy because we see the attacks on our communities happening on a daily basis. It's not as though nobody saw this coming. We knew this was coming. In fact, we've known this was coming for a long time. And prior to my work at Common Cause and working in democracy and civil rights, I worked for an organization called Kase, which is on the forefront of the Latino and immigrant rights struggle for many, many years. And I remember back in 2013 when we had a deal with the Gang of Eight in the Senate to move immigration reform. And then it got killed in the House. And we were so very close. I think it was 62-38, the vote in the Senate, which would have given a pathway to citizenship, which would have had major overhauls and protections for the Latino community here in the United States, but immigrants across this country. I also think it's, so we need to figure out what is the next evolution of that. The other thing is, and I think we all need to be centered in the fact that what we are seeing today is what Black people in this country have experienced for generations. There was something called the Fugitive Slave Act, which much of this administration has modeled their pursuit of immigrants in this country after. So this should be of no surprise to anybody that government can be weaponized to do harm to people. But what are we going to do about it? And that's what we want to talk about here today. And so, Tara, I want to start with you. At the National Urban League, you all are a civil rights organization. You're an organization that focuses on people. What are you hearing from your communities right now, from your members? And what are they putting first and foremost as the top priority when it comes to what we're seeing in our communities?
Well, thank you so much, Virginia, for moderating the conversation, and thank you, Juan and Ray, for convening this discussion and for inviting me. I send you greetings on behalf of the National Urban League's president and CEO, Mark Morial, as well. You know, the National Urban League, as Ray mentioned, has been around for 115 years, and we operate across the country. We're in 36 states and here in DC. And central to the National Urban League's mission has been expanding economic opportunity and protecting civil rights. And so that's been at the core of what we do for the past 115 years. The reality is that immigration is part of that mission, because in the communities that we serve across the country, immigrants are part of those communities and are part of the people that we serve daily through our organization. And right now is such a moment of just understanding the solidarity and understanding the work that we must do and must advance together, understanding that what we're seeing now is not just impacting the immigrant community, it's impacting our entire nation. And so we are just very keen right now to work hand in hand with organizations like LULAC, organizations like Common Cause, and come together to really fight against this common threat, this threat to democracy, this threat to the advancement of civil rights and opportunity for all in this country.
Thanks. And I guess I'm curious, Vanessa, as you're sitting with America's Voice and you're thinking about policy solutions, right now, as you're thinking about it, I feel like there are multiple tracks. It's not just about immigration reform. It's about civil and human rights as well, in a variety of different ways, whether it's at the ballot box or whether it's, the situation that we're seeing with ICE in cities. What are the things that you're focused on most from a first starting point? Because there's so many areas where we could focus.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And first, I just want to just say first to thank LULAC, because they are just such an amazing organization. And I was actually a LULAC member and a scholarship recipient when I was in high school. And I also came to the legislative conference when I was in high school. So yay! So first, I want to tell every student that's here, your future is bright. You belong here. And you are part of our collective resistance. And I just want to give everyone a big sort of just heart today, because we all are suffering so much under what is happening. I also want to recognize my partners here on this stage, because partnerships and coalitions is really how you build power. And the National Urban League is such an amazing organization that has stood with the Latino community for so many years, and the work that Common Cause does around voter registration and just voter outreach and democracy is just really, really key. We can talk for hours around immigration and what's sort of a path forward. In fact, this morning, I just posted a Substack, if you guys follow America's Voice online, where I talk about sort of the need for a vision on immigration reform that goes beyond the conversation, obviously, about enforcement that we're seeing. And again, we can talk about hours about how horrendous and horrific that is. But that we need to go beyond this binary of open borders or full deportations, because that's really where the extremes want us to be. And that's not what even the Latino community wants. We want a path where we have legalization and citizenship for people that have been here, especially those that have been here a very long time. And there is full support for that. I would say sometimes 70, 80% of support, even among independents. And there's also a recognition that we have to have a functional system where people can come here with a visa, and we have legal pathways to come. And we have to also address the concerns that people have about the border and public safety, because that's a reality. But we have to go, again, beyond this binary. I also just want to emphasize that we have to be really clear about the ideology behind this anti-immigration movement. And that is something that we really call attention to even before Trump was in the White House. He's a symptom, he's not the cause. And even if you remove him, you still have these anti-immigration forces that are going to be there. That's why, the last election cycle, we had Over $1 billion with the B is spent on anti-immigration ads all across the country, advancing these narratives of the great replacement theory, of quote-unquote non-citizen voting, which, by the way, are coming back again. So we have to understand that the path forward is one, power building, coalition building, and voter engagement, because you all know that our community does not vote at the levels of the power that we have. And this is a moment where everybody's paying attention. So it's incumbent upon us to bring people into our tent. The last thing I wanna say is that, right now, public opinion is on our side. And that is why it's really important for us to create the conditions to really bring those people in and mobilize them for the long term.
I'm so glad that you brought up voting, because we all know it always goes back to the ballot box, ultimately. I'm curious, and I would love to hear both of your thoughts on this. Right now, telling folks just to go vote is not only an act of resistance, but it's also an act possibly of putting your body on the line, because people are so afraid right now. We're hearing threats of ICE being at the polls, building perimeters around the polls. We've already seen the fear that ICE has put into our communities just for daily, activities. People are afraid to send their children to school. And we're not talking just about people who are undocumented in this country. It doesn't matter who you are. You just have to look a certain way. So I'm curious, how do we protect people at the polls with an ICE and still make sure that people can engage in this process right now? What are some things that you think right now we need to be thinking about? And this is something everybody in this audience can do to help make sure that the support is there for people to actually engage in voting.
Well, Virginia, I want to start with something that you shared that I just want to put a pin in, which is the erosion, the complete erosion of public trust based on what we're seeing right now. Whenever you have communities that are afraid to send their children to school, to go to the hospital, to engage with law enforcement, you see a complete erosion of public health, of public safety, and that is something that that I don't want us to take lightly, and I don't want to just pass that over, because it's a huge issue, because trust is so important to the foundation, so foundational to democracy, right? So our responsibility, as organizations, as civil rights, social justice organizations, is really to, frankly, do what we have always attempted to do, right? Which is expand public understanding. And also to expand the understanding of our role as it relates to protecting our communities. We will continue to do the things that we have always done, right? Including advocacy, including, I see Damon Hewitt over there, litigation, including amplifying our voices and using our platforms to come together to ensure that our communities are protected, and also ensure that we have a proper documenting of what is happening. And I think all of that is going to be important, but it's also going to be important for us to do this work not in silos, and for us to understand also what you shared, which is that this is not just an issue that's going to impact immigrant communities. This is an issue that's going to impact the election and voter turnout across the board in this country because of that erosion of trust. And so it is incumbent upon us to do what we have always done, but to do even more. in reaching, across the way to ensure that we are coordinated and working together so that our communities see the work that we are doing together to stand up and to fight back, so that they feel like they're not in this alone when they go to the polls. They know that there are organizations and there is infrastructure there to support them. So I think that's going to be critical for this election cycle.
Thank you. Vanessa.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that you said is true. I feel that, part of the strategy here is to foster fear and create fear and make people, one, either fearful of participating, or the other side is to make them believe that they don't matter, that their voice don't matter, that they cannot help make change, right? So that's the strategy, either to make you afraid or to make you so hopeless that you're just not even gonna try. And there's a colleague that I have, her name is Gracia Martinez, and she talks about she's the executive director of United We Dream, which many of you know, and she talks about the discipline of hope. And I think all of us, beyond doing everything that we know how to do, which is register people to vote, make sure that we have our everything in order for us to go to vote, making a plan, showing up, supporting organizations that are doing the work on the ground to get more people out to vote, we also have to really embrace this idea that, we have to have hope and we have to believe that we can change, because that's contagious. And in this moment, that's really what we need to do. We need to double down on our values, on the belief that we have about this country, because the other side is trying to kill that spirit among us. So I would say that in addition of doing everything that we can to support people voting, to making sure that we register more of our folks, to volunteering and organizing, we have to communicate that, again, this is our country too, we belong here, and there's a path for us to forward, that we have to fight for the American dream. So I would say that spirit we cannot let go of.
I appreciate that, and I think one of the things for folks who are here, and I know folks come from different backgrounds, different places around the country, what are some things, Vanessa, because you're talking about power building, which speaks to my organizing heart. I started as an organizer, and so I always think about what power looks like and how often we give our power away because we feel like we aren't powerful, but it's not until we start to think about the collective, all of us, what we're able to do. What would be a recommendation that you would give to anybody sitting here in this audience today on how they can use their power when they go back home?
Well, first of all, I would say volunteer, help people register to vote, just really be out there. I would also, this generation, you guys know how to use social media. And that has really changed the game for many of us. As a communications organization, we are also changing because we know that people are getting their news not just on traditional media. So there's a real important need for authentic, truthful, fact-filled voices out there that help people make sense of this moment. And based on all the research that we know, people trust the people they know. They trust the people in their community. So by you being a leader in your community, you helping make sense of this moment, sharing the correct information, really is what we need. We need all of you everywhere, all the time. And this year is so pivotal for our community.
Thank you. Tara, it was interesting. After Donald Trump was sworn in last year, the Urban League really took a leadership role in combating the attacks on DEI that we saw, because I think Mark and yourself and others fortuitously knew that was just the beginning, and it had really gotten us to where to be in a place where people could feel comfortable going after the immigrant community the way that they are. I'm just curious, how are you all showing up in this fight, and how are you thinking about this as it ties to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the multiracial democracy that we've all been working towards for such a long time? Can you create that through line for us?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Okay. That work through our Demand Diversity Roundtable has been so important because we understand that civil rights progress has always required communities coming together. It's always been a cross-racial movement, and it has to be that today. And so, we understand that even though our communities might face different issues, that it's all connected, and that the work towards progress is interconnected. So we have been doubling down on that. We convened that table last year. We've expanded that table. This year we were at the National Press Club last month with an expanded table talking about these very issues and how we're going to show up for one another this year, this election cycle, but in the years to come, because we know that the fight that we are in is not a fight of the moment, and it's really going to require all of us coming together for the foreseeable future to amplify our shared values, our shared humanity, and frankly, the shared stakes that we all have based on what we are seeing in this country and what we're seeing happening. So, for us, that is just foundational to the work that we do. Civil rights progress has always required that. And so we will continue to convene larger tables. We will continue to work with whoever wants to work with us on advancing the cause of human rights, of dignity, and of civil rights.
I'm curious, Vanessa, as we think about specifically in the Latino community that we can speak to, we also know that many of our friends, in some cases families, voted for this administration, right? There's a reality check also. It's not like there's a monolith here. How do we engage those individuals who are now realizing the harm that has been caused by their vote? And how do we welcome them back in? Because there's also there's a lot of tension, there's pain, there's all of these things, but we know we need a bigger tent and we have to move people over. What are your recommendations?
I'm so glad you asked me that because I wanted to talk about that. And believe me, as somebody I'm a progressive and I've worked on this issue for many years, and we went through the trauma of the first Trump administration, and I just could not believe some of what happened, last election cycle. But I've come to the place where we have to recognize that there was a lot of anger and disappointment in our community, and their concerns are also valid. And as long as this issue is seen in a partisan frame, it's also not helpful to us. And we have to recognize that. But early in my career, immigration used to be a bipartisan issue. I mean, you talked a little bit about that. We had Senator McCain. We had Senator Rubio back then being a huge champion for our issue. We had the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who was, again, really vocal about the need for reforms. And I think the path forward is we need to bring people back in, because again, this cannot just be seen as a quote unquote democratic issue. It needs to be an issue that's in the interest of our nation. It is imperative for our economy, and it's imperative for our values. So I would say that we have to have reconciliación, and we have to open up the dialogue. And they are, like I said, right now, even Trump voters are saying this is not what we voted for. So I think it creates the opportunity to bring more people in, to create those dialogues at the local level, and to come to some sort of agreement around the principles and the values that we aspire to in an immigration reform, should we ever have that. But I think, again, there's lots of agreement, for example, around DACA, right? Like around Dreamers. There's lots of agreement around farm workers. There's lots of agreements around people that have been here a long time, again, from both sides of the aisle. So we need to kind of create the conditions for that dialogue to happen, starting in our local community. But we have to bring them in. This is not a moment where we can afford to lose people. And I think that's kind of the vision that we need to have as we go, not just in this election, because remember, even if the turnout in November is what we hope for, we still have 2 more years of Trump. And as long as Stephen Miller is in the White House, his policy, our assessment is their policies are not going to change. They might change tactics, but their policies are not going to change.
Thank you both. I know that our time is up. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. We could do this for hours upon hours. I know that we can, and everybody has a lot of thoughts. But I really want to just leave you with one thing, and that is that you all have, everybody in this room has an opportunity to do something that is transformative in this moment. We all don't see it in ourselves all the time, but I do hope that you walk away feeling determined that you can go back to your home states, go back to your communities. Follow through. Look and see who has 287G agreements. How do you start talking to your local elected officials about getting those removed for your state? How do you start to engage with your local counties, making sure, or your state officials, to make sure that no ICE facilities can be built in your community? How do we make sure that we're setting up mutual aid? How do we make sure that we are making sure that people have protections, whether they're safety patrols or whatever, to make sure that people get to the polls, that people can vote early, that they can get their ballot cast by mail? All of these things are things that you can do that I know that you're already thinking about, but I just hope that you take some time today to talk to the people here at this conference to think about how you can bring other strategies home to your communities. Thank you all.